Ring ring, it's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep into the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host this week, Jacob McCourt, and today I'm joined by Mr. Luke Lewis. Hello.
Thank goodness for podcasting, Jacob. Happy to be here.
Hey, thanks for coming. Today we're going to talk about some lovely indie games, including thank goodness you're here. But before we do that, we're going to start with our icebreaker question, which is more of an icebreaker news topic that we want to talk about this week. We're going to unfortunately have to talk about the GameInformer closures. I have an article here from PC Gamer's Morgan Park that reads, "Our 33-year legacy deserves a genuine goodbye. GameInformer staff tweets one last goodbye after all their work was deleted. Then GameStop nukes the account from orbit." I'll read just two sentences from this thing. Last week, GameStop abruptly shut down its long-running game magazine, GameInformer. The staff was blindsided by the news. When they got to work on Friday morning, all 13 employees were laid off on the spot, and the next magazine issue, which was nearly complete, will not be finished. And then essentially what went on to say is that someone from the staff tweeted from the account just a goodbye that read, "Our 33-year legacy deserves a genuine goodbye," written by a former GameInformer member. "We're heartbroken by the shutdown of our publication, yet we leave with pride knowing we poured everything we had into it. In our words of our editor-in-chief, be well, play well." Then that tweet got nuked and the account got nuked, and not only is there no more GameInformer website, but there is also no more GameInformer X account. Luke, I have feels. How do you feel?
I think devastated is an understatement with this one. This was an absolute gut punch when I saw the news on Friday. I've been reading GameInformer. Gosh, I think I picked up my first issue when I was like 7 or 8 years old and have been reading ever since. Had many friends on that team, friends in the industry, and just always been a fan, always been a supporter. And yeah, to see this happen, despite the shitty corporate overlords of GameStop, this was shocking even in that context. You know what I mean? Even in that context. And I think the way it happened, you mentioned the nuking of the Twitter account, the website still baffles me of everything being offline. I fucking hope that is somehow resolved, at least for archival purposes, for long enough for people to pull things off of, because we're talking about decades of news, reviews, previews that are historic, and it's one of the longest running video games magazines, one of the last standing video games magazines. It's the end of an era to the nth degree. How are you feeling?
Yeah, look, I think it's really dumb. Even if I think of the business side of it, so excuse me while I put in my Lord Business cap for a second here, it literally makes no sense. You keep the website up for SEO purposes strictly and have it point back towards GameStop and or just run display ads on it, and you're making it's a net positive thing. That's the thing I don't understand. Like, if they, and again, we have friends that work there, that had worked there, so I'm going to be very careful with my words here and not play like fantasy football with what could have happened if they would have done it differently. But there's a world where they could have done this in a way that, yes, would have erased the legacy of GameInformer, but would have been more humane, would have been like, hey, we're going to shut down in 3 months. So you have time to find a new role, you have health insurance, we don't nuke this website that and this legacy that's been around for 33 years. But really it just goes to show that GameStop is arguably a business that shouldn't exist anymore, and might have got a few more years out of the meme stock thing, but I think there's a world where GameStop doesn't exist 5 years from now, and based on this decision, I'm fine with it. As a former employee of GameStop, I will say that.
Yeah, not a chance you catch me in a GameStop shopping. No,
I'm done.
Ever
I'm
again.
Actually done. Yeah.
It's been a long time aside from this, but yeah, this is the nail in the coffin. Absolutely. Yeah, I just hope everybody on that team, past and present, lands on their feet in a good spot. Be cool to see. I think about outlets like MinMax that formed off of the 2019 layoff, and I hope that not everyone leaves games media and finds a way to stay in the field, because I think there's a lot of talented folks that I'd personally love to support if they find a new endeavor, a new outlet, or a personal project, or any and all of those things.
Yeah, I just, it's really, really, really too bad. And I'm really happy that you mentioned the MinMax thing. MinMax is doing a celebration of GameInformer where they're going to be celebrating the 33 years of the publication with a series of videos. So you might want to check them out, and then obviously follow the staff. I know there have been folks that have sort of tweeted out the 13 employees that work for the company, but I might as well say them here. Matt Miller, Kyle Hilliard, Brian Shea, Wesley LeBlanc, Marcus Stewart, Charles Hart, Alex Van Aken, Margaret Andrews, Layla Azarshan, Monica Ortiz, John Woody, Sarah Hansen, and Rachel Castle. So, if you're listening to this and you have an opportunity in the games biz, then you know where to find these folks on the internet.
Hell yeah.
Cool. Well, let's take it from the dumps to something a little bit more positive. Today we're going to be talking through 4 video games that have 3 that have recently released, and then a 4th that came out earlier this year. We're doing another indie review roundup. We're going to be talking about the following games today, just so you can find the timestamps either on the podcast service or on the YouTube video if you specifically just want to find information about one game. Today we're talking about Thank Goodness You're Here, Dungeons of Hinterberg, Ete, and Penny's Big Breakaway. And we will start with a game that both of us have played. This is from Cole Supper. This is Thank Goodness You're Here. I reviewed this on the Gaming Brief and gave it an 8.5. Really loved it. I had a lot of positive things to say about it. Luke, I know that you've also played it. So why don't we maybe start with the setup of what the hell Thank Goodness You're Here is?
Sure. So at a base level, if you're not familiar with Thank Goodness You're Here, this is a really, what's the best word? Really different game, I think, in a lot of ways within a traditional mold. I think the traditional mold comes from it is an adventure style game where you play a character wandering around this quirky British town and you're interacting with people in different ways. You're solving puzzles and you're platforming around the environment to maneuver around. Base premise, but then throw in some sugar and spice and vibes of old school Cartoon Network and zany British humor and just wacky, ridiculous vibes. And you'll get Thank Goodness You're Here. It's this wonderful, eccentric game that feels really fresh and new amidst all of the other things I've been playing this year. I think we talk about games and like, what is the purpose of this game? What is it trying to accomplish? And I think this game just absolutely nails its execution, whether it's the awesome, colorful art style, the cool, eccentric music that varies from vocals to tuba to kazoo and everything in between. And then on top of that, the humor and the moment-to-moment writing is so funny. And I think this game just is just I'll throw out the word masterpiece. I think it really nails its vision and what it's trying to do. It's this awesome interactive cartoon experience, and I think it's a delightful time.
It's you sort of have stolen a lot of my thoughts on it. That
I didn't read your review, for the record, so I'm not.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, hey, let me reiterate some of the things that you haven't said.
Sure.
It's very Monty Python-esque.
That's a good one.
I watched a lot of Mr. Bean as a kid, so it's, I'm into that British humor that is occasionally horny, is occasionally dark, but is just like incredibly silly in a way. Like you play a very tiny salesman who goes to an old British town and literally you're just doing chores for people. But the moment to moment is just, like you said, so funny that men will be stuck in, a sewer grate, or you will fall through a chimney and get a man's house dirty about 5 or 6 times and drive him mad. The commercials are fantastic. There are like Family Guy style interstitials that when you activate or do a certain task in the game, it cuts away to this sometimes 60 to 90 second vignette about a character and their situation, and they're usually hilarious. I think that the thing that you could maybe say about this that is a negative is that it's not the most gamey game out there. And so if you're someone who the thought of just sort of walking around an environment, talking to people and, doing like quests, or I don't call them fetch quests, but like sort of doing errands for them. If that doesn't do it for you, I don't know if the humor will be able to save the lack of gameplay for you. But I think other than, hey, I don't do non-Dewey games well, any other person should be looking at Thank Goodness You're Here, because it's like you said, the presentation's phenomenal, how they move from vignette back to gameplay like seamlessly, the music, the voice acting is fantastic.
Acting's really good.
Yeah, and it's just such a, it's not the biggest map out there, but it is just so densely packed that your moves are jump and slap, and even some things like almost everything is interactable, even if it's just like you slap a carrot in a garden and it falls underground. It's just, there's a lot of charm in this thing, and I think that even in its 2 to 3 hour runtime, you'll get a lot out of this thing.
Yeah, totally. And on the note of it being like a relatively small map, I was really impressed at their ability to keep it interesting as you revisited locations with the environmental storytelling and things that they did. Like you'd be exploring one area, and a particular standout moment was a girl was bringing her boyfriend home to meet her parents, and as you continue to come back to that same alleyway throughout the game, you get like a new little interstitial part of that story. And I won't spoil like how it ends up, but it's really, really funny. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna go back to that alleyway where that dinner is happening. I want to know how that's going. And you got like little updates about the quirky people of this town, which I thought was really clever and fun.
It is so deeply silly too.
Oh, I mean, yeah. At one point, it's ridiculous.
There's a man in bed who has incredibly long, stretchy arms, and there's just like very fun things that happen with this stretchy armed man. And yeah, I think my biggest complaint beyond like, hey, not a very Dewey game, is that you will kind of aimlessly wander sometimes, and I think that's a deliberate choice for you to, like, there's no journal or quest log or like even Untitled Goose Game style list that says like, here are the things you have to do. So sometimes you'll go and speak to someone and you sort of almost have to remember what they said the first time, because not all times they will say, hey, I need you to go find that wrench, or go find that hammer, or go talk to this person. So you really have to be paying attention to what's happening. And really that's like my only other complaint with this thing. I think it's like, it's fun. It's really great. To the point where I go, is it an 8.5 or is it more? It's one of those one that sort of has simmered a little bit, and I went, this game is really good, and I didn't have a lot of complaints with it.
I think if I don't usually put a score on things, but I'd probably go like 9.5 for me, because like I just think if you're into what it's doing, it does it so well. And the only caveat I think is that you could say like there isn't a ton of like interaction gameplay wise, but I don't necessarily think that's a negative in some sense, because it's like I had such a nice time being able to sit down. I played it in one sitting and just really enjoyed my Saturday afternoon with it, and I thought that was perfect, and it didn't overstay its welcome. And we talk so much on this pod about, you know, we love a short game, we love games to sprinkle in between these giant releases, and like this is such a nice palate cleanser that's unlike anything else you'll play this year, and arguably anything else that's ever come out within this genre.
It makes me want to go back to play Cole Supper's first game, because my understanding is that it's even more horny than this one, but it's still a short, relatively cool experience.
Nice.
And I don't know how you feel, but the ending of this thing is maybe one of the best moments of the year.
It's real cool. It's
funny as hell.
I feel like we've highlighted enough things to like whet your appetite, so to speak, because it's one of those games that I'm just like, if you're interested in this, just go play it. Don't watch anybody play it, or, you know, just go check it out, because it's a total blast.
It does the Far Cry 4 thing also, and this is Haley McLean from MinMax who pointed this out, that it also, there's when you start the game again, this is not spoilers, this is the first minute of, or the first like 3 minutes of the game. You go to a meeting with the mayor of this town because you're a tiny salesman, and you essentially go early and you have no option to meet the mayor right away. But Haley figured out that if you just sit there and you wait for the mayor, you can eventually get to the ending of the game just by like sitting there for a while and waiting for the mayor.
Oh, really? That's so funny. Yeah. That's incredible. I love that.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts on Thank Goodness You're Here? I really love it. I think it's really great.
I really love it. It's a slam dunk for my top 10 at the end of the year. I think anybody that's remotely interested, anybody that appreciates having a good laugh, a quirky experience, like must play, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before we forget, a shout out to Popagenda, who sent us both codes for this game.
Much appreciated.
Just disclosure for the FTC, we got codes for this game, but I would have paid money for it. I would have paid some British pounds for this thing.
I probably will to play it again on Switch at some point. So that's
how
much I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for Switch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just for those wondering, I think it's literally out on everything, but I will confirm that unless you had anything else you wanted to say about this one.
I don't think so. I'll just add that Cole Supper, I think a studio to watch for sure, and this is now a name that if I see Cole Supper, if I see that Panic logo, I'm really excited to see what they're cooking up next.
Love it. I'll find out what systems this thing is on, because I did put it on my review, and if we could throw that review maybe in the show notes for this one, so if people want to read words about this one, they can do that. Again, this is on Mac, PC, PS4, PS5, and Switch, so no Xbox. Sweet. I played it on Steam Deck, and it worked. It was fantastic. No issues at all.
Cool. Yeah, I played it on PC with an Xbox controller. Great as well.
Let's talk about another indie game that was recently released. This one is one that you've played, Luke, and that I'm very curious to hear more about. This is Dungeons of Hinterberg. This one is on Game Pass, correct?
It is on Game Pass for Xbox and PC, so that's a great place to play it. Dungeons of Hinterberg is developed by Microbird Games. This is an indie game. I feel like I've been following this one for several years. I think it was first revealed in an Xbox event, and then I've seen it pop up at different showcases and things over the years. But the simplest elevator pitch for this one, it is a beautiful cel-shaded Zelda-inspired dungeon action game with a really cool dating social mechanic within it. Yep. And I'm having a blast with this one. I'm about 6 hours in. It has a really fun setting in that your character is a tourist in this beautiful alpine village known as Hinterberg. And so by day, you're going into different dungeons, you're solving Zelda-style puzzles, you're learning different combat abilities, you're fighting all these crazy monsters and things. And then you're going back to the village at night and you're choosing how to spend your time. You can relax with a boat ride, meet a friend at the cafe, talk to different people, find new items, change out your gear for the next day and that sort of thing. So it kind of has almost like I'd consider the nighttime element kind of like Boyfriend Dungeon or Persona.
That's what I was going to say.
A light version of those, I would say, in terms of like depth of things to do. But it's a very charming game. I think the characters are well written. There's no voice acting, but I think that's fine for what it is. It's just like a very meditative, relaxing game. The music's really nice, and I can't overstate how pretty the game is. It just has a really distinct, stylized, cel-shaded look to it that I really dig. But yeah, I'm about 6 hours or so in, and it's one that I continually want to keep playing, and then I'm getting pulled away for other reviews and different things. But I definitely want to keep going back to it, and I'm really enjoying it.
How is the combat in this one?
It's pretty solid. There's, sword-based combat, and then you also get some different magic abilities, and I think the magic abilities is where it kind of varies things up. I have an attack that can drop a bomb on enemies, you can do a tornado, you're doing spin moves with your sword, and you can level each of those up, and then as you explore more dungeons, you're unlocking new powers and different things. So I wouldn't say the combat is like the star. I think it's solid, but it's not the thing I like look forward to. I think for me it's the exploration, the Zelda puzzle solving, and just kind of the stylized vibe of the world that kind of brings you into it. But yeah, combat's pretty good, I would say.
It's like relatively long compared to maybe some of the other games that we're going to talk about. What's the structure of this one like?
So you start in the kind of hub world town of Hinterberg, and then there's a day-night cycle, and each day you go out, do dungeons, come back at night, hang out in the town, and do different side activities.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a combat level that you're leveling up by acquiring new gear and charms that allow
Mm-hmm.
you to access different dungeons, because you can essentially, within the given zone you've unlocked for the dungeons, you can go anywhere within that zone. So you can run to a dungeon that's over leveled and you get your butt kicked, and then you got to go back and kind of not grind a little bit, because the way it's sequenced, it's like, okay, go to clear all the level 1 dungeons in this area. Now you're level 2, so go to the level 2 dungeons in these first areas. But like right now I'm 6 hours in and I've unlocked the first 3 or 4 zones, so I have kind of a wide variety to play with. So I have a couple different areas I can jump between in any given day and check things out. But yeah, it's a pretty satisfying game loop. I've heard reports that to beat just the story, it's around like 12 to 15 hours.
Okay.
Doing all of the side quests for more 100% completionist runs is closer to 20. So it's still like a pretty nice, for this type of game, I think that's a nice, concise experience compared to like 100-hour Persona. This is like, we're talking less than 30 hours, I think, to do everything if you wanted.
I need to know more about the dating stuff. Tell me how to date people.
How to date
or creatures?
People. No, people, dating people. Yeah, it's really cute and charming. You meet a lot of fun cast of characters. You can bring gifts to them. In the evenings, you choose how to spend your time. So you can go see Marina, who works at the ice cream shop, and chat with her, and then go on a boat ride. Or you can head to the bar and do some club style dancing. And
Ooh.
each activity benefits your character differently. So it's like, oh, this will increase your amusement, and this will increase your relaxation, or this will increase your familiarity with this given character. So there's like a little bit of strategy of like, oh, is this the best use of my time, or do I just want to do this because it's fun? And you can kind of play around that way. And then it's also fun because during the day when you go to dungeons and you're exploring Hinterberg, you can also just choose to like do an activity and not go into the dungeon. So if you want to just like meditate by a tranquil water feature, you can do that, and that'll affect your stats and different things. There's an awesome photo mode, so you can mess around with that. So it leans into this like, I'm a tourist in the Alpine mountains in a really cute, charming way. But yeah, it's been a fun time.
Maybe my last question is around like what sort of folks would you recommend this to? I know that you said, hey, Zelda style combat, a dating element, so something like, Hatoful Boyfriend, something like that might be a good idea. But is there a genre of player that you're like, hey, if you like X style of game, you must play this?
Sure, I'd say if you like a nice like action adventure puzzle title, definitely a solid pick. If you are always interested in a game like a Persona, but are kind of intimidated by the length, I'd say this is a nice entry point for something a little more concise. I'd say if you're a fan of Boyfriend Dungeon, I'm talking to you, friend of the show, Matt Storm. I think you should check this game out. But yeah, I think that's like the base level. And then on top of that, I'd say if you enjoy a colorful, relaxed indie, like this just feels like a very approachable action adventure game. I think it's a low barrier to entry, and the combat is pretty breezy, and nothing ever feels too crazy difficulty, but it's like engaging enough that I'm still having fun with it, and I'm dodging, I'm using different powers, and like there's some variety to it, so it keeps it interesting.
Anything you haven't mentioned around Dungeons of Hinterberg that may be relevant here?
I don't think so. I'm interested to see how I feel about it once I finish it, since I think, roughly at kind of the halfway point as far as just the main story goes. So, but as of right now, loving it. Can't wait to play more.
Cool. I know we said at the start that this thing's on Game Pass, but I'm assuming that it's available on more things.
It's also on Steam. It's verified on Steam Deck, which is worth noting because I think this would be a fun one to chip away at in handheld if you were interested there. I don't believe it's on PlayStation, so I think it's PC, Xbox, yeah.
Yeah, Xbox Series X, S, and Windows. So that's Dungeons of Hinterberg.
I want to hear about a game that you played while I was exploring the Swiss Alps. You were painting in Montreal. Talk to me about Ite.
Love it. Yeah. So the funniest part is, and I've said this before, is I went to a bachelor party immediately after playing Ete, and went back and forth with the dev on Twitter, actually being like, "This looks like Ete." They were wildly inspired by it. But anyway, what is Ete? Ete is a game where you play sort of an aspiring painter who decides they want to spend the summer in Montreal, and so you find a room. You end up finding out that that room promised to be furnished. It was not. And so they say, hey, we'll cut you a deal, all the money in your pocket for the entire summer's rent in Montreal. You say yes, and then you're sort of thrust into the world of Ete. Ete is a painting game where the core mechanics are painting the world and painting like pictures. And so the world looks, this game is beautiful. I will recommend that you play it on a PC. I started playing it on Steam Deck. Not optimized for Steam Deck, not approved for Steam Deck, so I don't want to be like, hey, it's approved and it's bad. Not approved for Steam Deck. This is a computer game. Please play it on a computer. But essentially, the world is colorless. You move around your mouse and you start clicking around, and as you click, it paints the world in sort of watercolor, which is like the coolest thing in this game of just, going around and, hey, there's a bench. You just like color it with your mouse, and then it lights up, and then there's, bubbles of paint that come out of it. And then once you've painted that bench, you then get a decal for your album, and that album essentially lets you paint portraits. And the painting portraits part is you go up to an easel, and then you have a bunch of decals in your inventory of the stuff that in the world you have colored fully, and then you can make portraits that you can then sell, that you can give to people in side quests, and then eventually create your own exposition. This game's rad. It is it is definitely a game, a different strokes for different folks sort of game that is like, if I'm explaining it, it's exactly as described. As you will go around 7 different areas of Montreal and sort of paint the world, and then talk to people and maybe paint them some portraits. And there is sort of furniture and decorating as well, where you can buy furniture from an antique store and sort of decorate your spaces. But if painting and decorating are not your thing, Ete is probably not the game for you. But honest to God, I say this having just been to Montreal. This is probably the best virtual way to experience Montreal before you go. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to go to Montreal, or I have a planned trip to Montreal, there is no better way to experience Montreal than playing Ete.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I played the Steam Next Fest demo for this one over the summer, I believe, and I'm curious. I really liked when you're making your individualized art pieces, you're able to like manipulate objects within the frame and kind of customize things. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how it evolves maybe over the course of the game?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, everything that you sort of pick up, you get decals. So let's say like you paint a bench, you'll get a bench, and there's 18 different categories of decals, and like there are hundreds of different decals. There's people, there's animals, there's furniture, there's buildings, there's etc. So typically you can either paint whatever you want and sell it in the cafe for money, or someone specific asks you, as many of the side quests in this thing, to say like, hey, I want you to paint me a picture of Eat the Rich, and in that I need you to have a pig, a fork, and a knife. But beyond that, it is up to you with how you want to paint that thing. Free painting, side missions, but then also there's color. So throughout the game, there are these pigments that you can collect in the world that are just sort of strewn about. You collect 3 pigments in the world, and you can select a new color to unlock that you can then either color the decals or you can color the background. So if you imagine like maybe if you had an old, there was these old computer games that you could play on CD-ROM back in the day where you could like make your own art as a kid that was very much like, here's a stencil, color the background, color the stencil. Like that is truly the vibe. It is basic, but it's fun and it works.
Hell yeah. Kid Picks vibes out here. I think
Kid
that
Picks.
was one of them.
It's exactly Kid Picks.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Love that.
I thought it was a Canadian thing, so I didn't want to say it, but Kid Picks.
I think that was a US thing. I remember we had you remember the old Mac desktops that were like color wave?
Yes.
With like that looked like the cool translucent
Yes.
N64s, but it was
yes.
Yeah, I remember doing
Emacs
kid
used
picks,
to have color, right?
on those. Yeah, that good times. That's
Rad.
awesome.
I played it for maybe 4 hours,
Okay,
and I
was
did
curious.
maybe some of the side missions, but it's one that you could probably play in a couple of sittings, and it's one that
Nice.
you could literally go and do every single side quest and paint every inch of the 7 different areas in this thing, and then even there's a post game where you can, you essentially come upon this. I don't want to call it like an abandoned church, but it's a large abandoned building that you end
Mm-hmm.
up, doing your exposition within. You can then get money to open additional wings in this building, and that's sort of the post game where you can kind of, just make a bunch of pictures. You can do every side mission, paint every piece of it. But I played it for 4 hours, and I said I'm really good with this. I enjoyed my time with it. I think the thing I would say is like it's sort of self-guided. It's very much like they let you go and they're like, just go, man. And so if the self-guided, self-directed game is not your thing, maybe not. And then like I said, do not play this on Steam Deck. But if you do have a PC, even I would imagine like a not a like a couple year old PC, you'll be fine. But the Steam Deck, this is not optimized for it. So that's my time with it. I also reviewed this one for the gaming brief. So if you want to read words about this one, we'll also link that one out. I gave this one a 7.5. It was very much like, hey, different strokes for different folks. But I didn't really have many. It's just a very small, self-contained experience that was I don't want to call it thin, but like it very much just it does the thing. If you watch 10 seconds of it, that's it. That's the whole thing. So, but the characters also are beautiful. They have like this sort of framey animation to them where they're deliberately skipping frames, but it looks really good. I really love my time with it. And so this one's only available on PC right now. But if painting, decorating is your thing, please dive headfirst. And again, thanks again to our friends at Popagenda for sending a code for this one as well. FTC, don't come after me.
Nice. Yeah, this one's definitely on my radar. I want to just relax. I want to paint stuff. Sounds awesome.
And the music is just so perfect for this, where it's subtle, and the sound effects are actually the thing that you'll probably connect with more. It's so satisfying to like paint a bench and then it lights up and then paint bubbles come out of it, and you collect those paint bubbles and there's this little sound when you're doing it. Nice. And you then get like a power up that allows you to like throw a bomb of color in an area that lights up others. It's a vicious circle.
Yeah, that part of it almost gave me like Unfinished Swan vibes.
Yes,
of just like
yes,
stylish, cool, colorful, storybooky. Yeah. Nice.
I hope this team does well with this game.
Yeah,
I hope it ends up on different consoles. I can imagine that maybe it may be challenging to get on some consoles, especially like I think, hey, it might struggle on Switch. Hey, it might struggle on Series S. It is a beautiful game. Beautiful. Easily will be in our conversation of like most beautiful games of the year when we talk about it at the end of the year.
Do you think that is part of that technical limitation, maybe like to do with like the layering and everything that it has?
Potentially.
Where it's like,
yeah,
because you can kind of just do anything and you could keep putting images on top of images in the file. Like, well, I'm not a programmer, but that seems like it might be
the painting, the portrait side of it. Yeah. But I just think it's beautiful. And I would imagine that based on the way it goes is maybe they have to render 2 versions when you first come into an environment of like, what is the no color version and what is the colored version? But they're just like very dense environments, moving characters, tons of different things you can light up. Even the sky, like you can just paint clouds in the sky too. Like that's rad.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
You've sold me.
Yeah, I've sold another copy of ET. Here we go. And that one I think is from Impossible is the name. I'm going to double check, but I think the name of the dev is Impossible. But we're going to maybe double check that before we go into our last game here. Which if you don't have any, it's from Impossible. Cool. I'm glad I got that right there. Final game is one that came out a couple of months ago. This one is Penny's Big Breakaway. This comes from Evening Star, published by Private Division, and this is a title coming from the team that did Sonic Mania. so Christian Whitehead and others. Instead of a 2D platformer, it is a 3D platformer. This one came out a couple of months ago, so we aren't going to spend a ton of time on it, but it's one that I just finished literally a couple of hours ago. And I'm a huge fan of Sonic Mania. It is the best Sonic game that's come out since Sonic 3. And I will say I'm sort of disappointed by Penny's Big Breakaway, to be honest with you.
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
Luke, I broke your heart there.
It, but go ahead. Tell me more.
So it's a 3D platformer.
Yep.
Your central mechanic is you have a yo-yo, and that yo-yo allows you to, defeat enemies. It allows you to kind of throw it for traversal, and then also you can ride on it. There's like 11 worlds in this thing, boss battles, the whole deal. The traversal with the yo-yo is great. There's a couple of core mechanics. There's like you can swing it in front of you and you basically swing on it. You can use a dash to dash with it. And you can also just do like a double jump basically with it. Those 3 core jumps in it, fantastic. Feels so good. You know exactly where you're landing. If you screw up, it is maybe the camera's fault. But it is not the platforming's fault or the actual core mechanics of the game. The getting on the yo-yo is a little too slidey. It's like you can do the almost spin dash that you can do with Sonic, where you can, if you're stationary, you can spin dash your yo-yo and then go. But the locomotion just never felt right. The slidiness never felt, it's almost like you're on ice the entire time. And the combat and targeting for this thing is just, I don't think is very good. There's a reticle that in order to, throw your yo-yo either at enemies or at platforms to expose them, it does this thing where it's wide when it says, hey, you're about to target this area, and then it sort of circles in when you're within the right distance. But your yo-yo, when you throw it out, it doesn't change distance. Like the throw is a fixed distance. So I found myself sometimes throwing my yo-yo, expecting to hit a platform to expose it, to hit an enemy, and it just like was not reliable. So I think between the slidiness of the yo-yo, which could have been cool, it reminded me a lot of Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, weirdly. Like the old team, the Sonic Team GameCube game, and I wanted to as a big fan of that game. I'm like, ooh, this looks like a game I really liked back in the day. Let's hope it's good. It's not a bad game.
Sure.
It is just one that I think where Sonic Mania was, I just had a very high expectation, which may be unfair for Evening Star, but it's just one that like it just didn't. The combat wasn't right. The yo-yo didn't move the way I wanted it to, and I think they give you power-ups that sort of vary things a little bit, where sometimes you'll get a pepper that will give you a super boost or invincibility, or a little thing that you can twirl up in the air and then glide down. But the actual worlds themselves didn't vary a whole lot, and even the boss battles, like there's maybe 6 of them in this thing, and 4 of them are just not good. The design aspirations exceed sort of what your character can do. And I can see the inspiration. I'm like, oh, this is the Mario 64 Bowser fight, but Penny, which was good. But the final boss itself, especially, not good. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I would say Penny's Big Breakaway is a little disappointing.
Do you think, is this the case of like a developer trying to emulate that retro game feel, but leaning too hard into the old game vibe and not recognizing that, like, maybe that, I don't know if they did intentionally wonky controls, but it sounds like the controls can be a little wonky. You know what I mean? Of like lean too hard into the retro gameplay and not quality of life.
I don't know. I almost feel like this game could have really benefited from like 6 more months.
Okay.
As like, that's incredibly harsh to say. But the thing that I go is like,
I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of potential though with what you're saying. So it's like,
I think the thing that I having read, like, I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't read the reviews, because this thing's been out for 4 months. Like the reviews were a little all over the place. There were some people that, were very platform heavy that were like, yo, this is amazing. And some people sort of felt like I felt, where it was like a lot of promise for Evening Star.
Sure.
And like I said, I would play Evening Star's second game in a heartbeat. I would I don't know if there's a demo on Steam or not, but it's not one that, like, if you love 3D platformers and you're hankering for one, give Penny's Big Breakaway a try. But it's not really one that is going to bring in new fans. And it's not one that I can recommend.
Okay, fair enough. Disappointing, but might check it out down the line if there's a Steam sale or something along those lines, because I do crave, whether it's a GameCube or a Dreamcast, just a quirky platformer. I like a quirky platformer, and it feels like it almost fills that void.
Yeah, and look, different strokes. I saw some people that enjoyed it.
Sure.
I just was not one of those people. So the music, though, is really good. T. Lopes did the music for it, and T. Lopes makes great music. So
hell yeah.
Great music on this. Locomotion's good, except on the Yo-Yo. That's Penny's Big Breakaway. That one came out in February, so I'm just sort of checking it out now.
Wow,
it's out on PS5.
That's crazy.
What is time? PS5, Switch, Windows, Xbox Series X, and S. They made their own engine for this, so the one thing I will recommend if you're curious is Digital Foundry did a breakdown of this and showed how technically impressive the game is, that it essentially runs at 60 regardless of almost what platform you have it on, except one. I think is it Xbox or Switch? One of the two of them, there's a weird thing where it doesn't run at 60, but this thing runs at 60 very smoothly. So I will laud them on the fact that
Respect.
I believe they made their own engine. That would be, I think it's the Star Engine is the name of it potentially, but it looks and moves really well graphically. Yeah,
very good.
So that's
love it.
That is Penny's Big Breakaway.
Yeah.
So many games to play. We talked about a bunch of them. So again, those are our thoughts on Thank Goodness You're Here, Dungeons of Hinterberg, Ite, Penny's Big Breakaway. Luke, anything else you want to say about any of those video games?
I don't think so, but go play the ones that were of interest to you. Lots of good stuff out there. Tell us what you think in the comments.
Ooh, yeah. Either tell us in the comments on YouTube, or, we're going to do the Hey, It's Three Things time. You can tell us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos. Please send this podcast to a friend, because that's how people hear about podcasts, and give this a review on your podcasting platform of choice, because that is how people hear about podcasts. We've got some shows coming up before PAX. We will be at PAX. More details on that soon. But my friends, that is the end of our episode for today. So with that, I'll say indie games. I'm addicted, and I just can't get enough.